Good morning, KNS. It is Saturday, March 7th. I'm your host, Bud Wiry, and you're in the shop. So, guys, we got a lot of stuff out here affecting a lot of people, so jumping right off in it. So, I want to start with BlackRock is actually finalizing the sale with AES. They're buying out AES. And, guys, this is earth shattering for all the people that use AES because you're going from a company that is like a public utility to a company that only exists to create profit. And it's so bad, and everybody knows that it's so bad that AES has actually canceled all of their public meetings now that they've had after. They're citing threats, and whether there's actually been threats or not, they know what they're doing is going to directly harm all these people. And it makes it a lot harder to sit there and look everybody in the eye when you're going to do them dirty. And that's what AES is doing. They're selling out to a company that only exists to make big numbers for all their shareholders. So for everybody that's getting ready to use or that is currently under AES, I mean, you guys are absolutely getting ready to see dramatic spikes in your electricity rates. They're going to push it through. The only thing that could really stop them is the government regulatory board that has to approve the rate increases. But they've pretty much been historically, if you go off what they've done, they've pretty much been a rubber stamp. So that's what everybody should expect moving forward. When these people say, "Hey, we need to raise this much," they're going to give the government a handful of reasons and maybe a couple Colts tickets or something. And next thing you know, everybody's on the hook for a whole lot more money. So everybody, and this is all stacking up, and this is all coming from the government selling out the public utilities to these private companies. Because if you look, how did it get to that? It used to be Indianapolis Power and Light, but then Indianapolis Power and Light got sold out to AES, and now AES is selling out to BlackRock, which is a private equity group. They sit there and they buy things and they try to make money on it and they try to bring their shareholders back. I mean, these people got their hands in all kinds of stuff. And they've there's been a lot of talk about BlackRock and a lot because they will invest in anything they pretty much they think they can make some money at. But the reason why they're buying AES is because Indiana is approving all these data centers. They're going to use all this electricity. So they're gambling on the fact that the increase in demand and the shortage of supply is going to create the perfect environment for them to skyrocket the price of electricity and for them to put a lot more money back in their and the shareholders' pockets. So this is bad. And I don't support any of these people that are selling off the public utilities to these conglomerates. So you look at like Citizens. It was Citizens. It used to be the Indianapolis owned their own water and their own sewer and their own pipe work and their own infrastructure, but then they sold it all out to Citizens. And now these years later, look at it. We got Citizens is now approving Lebanon to turn Eagle Creek into a toilet. So this is what happens. There is a cause and effect of giving private companies that aren't necessarily for the people all the time, and they have other things. So they'll tell you that Citizens, is a public utility, da 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 da. But the CEO of Citizens makes $2.5 million a year. They have some incentive for them to make more money and for them to do these things because they're giving themselves while they're still able to label themselves a nonprofit. That's kind of a loophole. You can be a nonprofit, but where does most of the profit go? To their enormous salaries. And so that's kind of how that works. But you got Citizens now making this decision to let Lebanon turn Eagle Creek into a toilet, to where before the city would have had complete control instead of it being this third party. So, and you look, and guess who did that? So we just seen that Greg Ballard jumped into the Secretary of State race as an independent. Now, I think for the most part, who's this going to help? It's going to help the Bo Bai, the Democrat, get in office, because now you're going to have Diego, which he ain't good. Nobody wants him. I don't want to vote for him either. But now you got Ballard, who actually was the last Republican mayor of Indianapolis, but he's very much to the left. He was in on that Blue Indy project, and then you also had like this sale of the city's water infrastructure to Citizens. So that was Greg Ballard that actually put that in effect, and that's down the road now. We're seeing what it is these things are happening in Indianapolis. While the people in Indianapolis, the politicians could fight it because Indianapolis still owns the reservoir. They don't have as much of a hand in it as what they would have if they had complete control over the water infrastructure. So, these are the things. So you look at what happened. IPL sold off to AES. Now AES sold off to BlackRock. See, this is what's happening. Now we're getting to the point where private companies are controlling people's vital resources. And guys, that is terrifying. You don't want companies that only exist for profit and this and that to be controlling your water and your electricity, because they will ration for you to give it to the people that are paying more for it. I mean, once a company is driven by numbers and there's a bean counter in some room saying, hey, if you do this, it's going to make you this much more, it's just the way it goes. You look at so a lot of these same private equity companies like BlackRock, how they bought up all this housing market and how that's pushing up the thing. So you're like, okay, now rents are $1,500 a month for a, 1-bedroom apartment or something like that. They push these things sky high. And really, it's probably some bean counter in a room somewhere saying, hey, we'll increase homelessness by 5%, but the rest of the people will be able to pay this much more to keep a roof over their head. And we're going to make this much more money. I guarantee somebody somewhere has seen the calculations on that and made a decision that that's what they were going to do. So when you start that's why I fully support, we need to be getting these private equity companies out of housing. We need to get these private equity companies out of our electricity. We need to get them out of our water. We need to be getting these companies out of our life-giving infrastructure, because they do not always have our best interest at heart. And that's what you're seeing now with Citizens, with the Eagle Creek. I mean, there's now going to be 25 million gallon a day of industrial and pharmaceutical wastewater pouring right into the reservoir. Now, guys, they say right now, if you watch this last meeting, which there was some stuff so they say that there is currently 3 communities that wastewater ends up in Eagle Creek. Now, they pour into a creek that then feeds into Eagle Creek that then gets down there. They're upstream. But they say all 3 of them have a combined total of 8 million gallon a day of wastewater. But now Lebanon is going to dwarf that by just dumping 25 million gallon a day straight into the reservoir. Now, guys, and if you watch this meeting, oh my God. And for those of you that follow the shop or the YouTube page or anything else, you guys already seen it. But we actually had the general manager of the Lebanon Utilities say that the wastewater was going to make water sports better in the reservoir. Guys, you should have heard the crowd. You could hear the laughter coming across everybody, because absolutely no one believes that having 25 million gallons a day dumped straight into the reservoir is going to help the water sports there. People are going to find out. People are going to know this piece of information. All that has happened is a small select amount of state insiders and Lebanon politicians have made a conscious decision to turn Eagle Creek Reservoir and the water supply to 1 million people into a damn toilet. That is the God's honest truth. That's what's happening. You're sitting there and you're taking 25 million gallon a day, you're dumping it right in it, shoving it through some crappy waste treatment plant, and then feeding it to a bunch of families. Now, and in the same meeting, guys, I hate to go to some of these meetings. So I get all fired up about it, and it gets me way out of hand. So I usually try to watch the meetings inside the shop here so I can take notes and be reasonable about it. And if I need to throw a wrench, I can sling one. But somebody at this meeting, and I haven't decided if I'm going to this next one or not, but somebody has to ask these very important questions. And when they're right there and everybody can see them, and you're asking the mayor and the Lebanon City Council, ask them if they can remove every single chemical that they're putting in the water. Point blank, because the answer is no. They need point blank asked whether or not this deal with Citizens is going to be putting new chemicals into the mouths of Lebanon children, because the answer is absolutely yes, it's going to be putting new chemicals into it. I'm compiling the list right now of the different chemicals that they are going to be putting into the mouths of Lebanon residents that Lebanon residents right now don't get. Right now, Lebanon residents don't get these microplastics. They don't get these PFAS, and they don't get some of these industrial runoff chemicals because you're drinking well water. But now this water is going to be going. So when somebody goes to McDonald's for lunch and gets that fountain Coke, their fountain Coke's going to have this water in it. When somebody goes out to the restaurant, when somebody goes to the little brew house to get a beer, this stuff is going to be in there. And guys, the more you start to study it, the harder it gets to look at a lot of that stuff because you talk about the microplastics. So they're saying right now, because microplastics build up in the brain, that the average person has 7 grams of microplastics in their brain. Guys, this is a lot. This is something that is some next world problems, and this is the things. And they try to sugarcoat it. They just go emerging chemicals. What it is everybody's realizing what the results are of having all this stuff in the water, and it's becoming quite terrifying. So everybody, but that's what I'm getting back to. So at these meetings, people need to point blank ask them. Because if you can sit there and just ask him, because they were playing theater that last time, and it's so hard to watch because I think it was Mike Kincaid I seen. So tell me, about there won't be any contaminants in the water, and then you had Jacobs get up there and try to act. The water will be perfectly safe by government standards. Well, government standards allow a lot of these chemicals, and guys realize when they say, there's only so much of this chemical, only so much of that chemical. A waste treatment plant at best tests for 120 chemicals. There's over 3,000 pharmaceutical compounds alone. And they know that the waste treatment process concentrates some of them. And they know that they know that the treatment plants can't remove this stuff. But they're not even treating for a fraction of what is actually out there. So the truth is, when they say that it's perfectly safe, this and that, the truth is they do not know. And the truth is they also do not know what the long-term effects of having these chemicals in your water is going to do to people over 10, 20, 30 years. There's not this history study time out there to do it. Companies like Eli Lilly are developing new chemicals and new compounds, and nobody knows what effect that's going to have on anybody. So to dump it, and I think really what the answer is all of these companies, and I've heard some other people talking about, maybe it was a Subaru plant here in Indiana, that they do their own closed loop and they purify their own water and they make it to where they can reuse it again. And then they just probably have a replenishing supply from the municipal water, wherever they get it. But I think that's going to be what the real answer is, because we cannot be putting everybody's lives at risk and all the health of large groups of people just based off, well, maybe it's going to be all right. Because that's really where they're at. They want it to happen. So they're just kind of telling you it's going to be all right. But, these chemicals that are coming out of the data centers, and it's all the stuff. So if you look at everything that they're doing, they have no idea how it's going to affect people. And the people that approved it just didn't care. There was money. Oh, we're going to send the city back $1 million a year or something. And that was all they needed to hear. Good enough for them. So, but right now we looked at Meta. So it was sent to me by somebody, and I posted it up, was the permitting for the IDEM, because now Meta is wanting to get 65 natural gas fired 2,700 horsepower cat generators. Now, guys, I did a little looking up on this. So I tested it. I looked up the exact model of cat engine that would be doing this, what the decibels for it were. And the decibels for this cat engine range between 75 and 95 decibels between how high it's revved up. And in comparison, 1,000cc sport bike pinned to the wall makes 80 decibels. So we're really looking, I'm trying to give it a real world, because everybody knows when a sport bike goes ripping by, or you can be outside and you can hear one from several miles away. What we're really going to have is 65 of them there sitting there screaming 24 hours a day. Now, and they like to say in their little thing, they were just going to do this temporary until permanent power became available But I think the reality is, guys, and everybody needs to learn to accept it real quick, because I believe this is going to be the new normal. I think that these power plants, they all were out there with Trump and they were talking about making their own energy. So I think this is what that solution is really going to look like. I think they're going to run these natural gas generators forever. And the reason why they had to do an IDEM permit in big part is because these are going to be considered a mass polluter by this IDEM standard. So I went through the paperwork, and you guys ought to go back to the shop page and you can read through all that yourself. The file's been posted there. Um, and you can see this is a very serious thing, and you can kind of go through the information for yourself. Like I said, I read through it, I go through it, I put it out there to you guys with my opinion, but always you can go back. I try to post every bit of the information that I come across, and I share a lot of that stuff so that everybody can see it for yourself, because let's be honest, nothing really beats forming your own opinion off the information that you're taking in. So check that out and look at the standards on this power generation. And so, I mean, the people that live close to this meta site, and it's going to be huge for Lebanon. Guys, everybody's got to remember. So when we're talking about, there was a new study that came out talking about, the Fox 59 actually shared it, talking about how data centers emit nitrogen dioxide and tiny inhalable particles that can harm lungs and cause an early death. When we talk about this loud noises and these big hums that come from it and all of this other stuff, they literally built the meta site directly to the west of Lebanon. So guys, every bit of so if it's going to have this pollution from this generating system, if it's going to have noise, if it's going to have any of this, these little particles or everything else, every bit of that's going to be wafting right into the community. So, I mean, it is undeniable that when we get back to like talking to these politicians at the meeting, it is undeniable that they have made decisions that are going to put new chemicals in the water of Lebanon families. It is undeniable that they're putting new stuff into the air that's going to go into the families of Lebanon. And I mean, that's all fact provable stuff. And here's the thing. They show no remorse for it. They act like it's no big deal, like it's okay. And it's not okay. And it's not okay to harm the people that have entrusted you to take care of them. And that's what it is. People get out there and they vote, and then they hope that these people have their best interests at mind while they're busy with their life and doing everything else. But that's not what we're seeing around here. We're seeing politicians and these council members make decisions that harm not only this community, but other communities. And they're doing it without any real information. I mean, just even in that meeting where I was talking about Kincaid asking about this stuff, guys, the people on that board ought to be the most versed people on these contaminants and the waste treatment plants. And if you're making a vote that's going to affect this many people, should you not have done your absolute most homework? I mean, guys, I find that offensive to a thing like, you're going to make a vote that all these people are going to be drinking this water. Then you ought to be able to recite every bit of this data, because it's government studies that I put out there talking about how these waste treatment plants can't get it out. It is all legitimate information that has come out, and everybody can know it, but they're still asking questions about it. And that's not right. They need to be knowing. And how I want them to all look at everybody in the eye, and I want them to acknowledge the fact that they're putting these chemicals into people's mouths and the people's families while they're taking that vote. When they say yes and they vote for it, they're going to have to own that, because one way or the other, it's going to be owned, because all of this stuff is getting recorded. Because I'm going to tell you, one of these days, what they're doing here is going to end up being a documentary, because your community decides to put all this wastewater from, chemical or pharmaceutical manufacturing plant, and everybody's drinking water. And 10 years from now, when people are having horrible side effects, or something bad's happened, or we have something, in the habitat, maybe it kills off a bunch of birds, or it does anything. There's a whole host of things that it could happen. It could be something that poisons, the wildlife first and harms that. But it could be a long-term thing with people. You just don't know. And when these people act like they can stop it before it happens, when they don't even test for it, guys, you got to be paying attention to this stuff. because that's the hook. They will just point blank lie to you. And it's like, oh no, we test for these things. Well, they test for what the government has 120 regulated chemicals, and they test for that. And the other thousands that could be in there, they have no idea. They have no test for. They have no point of reference, and they just let it go on through while telling you guys it's clean, safe water. So, and that's all the time. It's a sad reality, but the government is just lying to people all the time. Just like these data centers, they scream how many construction jobs, local construction jobs it's going to create, and then Meta chooses Mortison and Turner, out of state companies. I think one was from Minnesota and one from New York, to come do the construction here for their data center. So it's always, they say one thing out of one side of their mouth, and out of the other side comes the reality that you're usually taking it on the raw end of the deal. But all right, so moving on from the water, the Boone EDC just appointed Denise Niblick as the director of business engagement and partnerships. And I just the part that's notable about this is Denise Niblick is also the VP of the Heart of Lebanon. So she's in with that crew, and she's also on the planning commission. So those are other boards where she's in there with Coots and other Gentry insiders. So what we really have here, and I called it right away, and then they proved it for me. So what we had here is pretty much the city putting another, one of their plants into a county position. Now, the Boone EDC has been on their team for a while. The Boone EDC appointed a left-wing activist as their interim director. Corey Coots has been on there. You've had different people that have been a part of this Boone EDC. You have that Jason Plunkett that's now running for one of the commissioner spots. He was a Boone EDC president. He's also on the Republican vice chair, Zionsville Council, and with a lot of these states. So it's all of the same things. You got to watch where these people bounce around to. But the Boone EDC has had a history of a lot of this left-wing stuff, and now they're getting one of their Heart of Lebanon people. And she's also a MAD area planner for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And what I found shocking about that is how hard Dora, and I believe even herself personally, pushed for the Dora, which was the outside drinking that the Lebanon City voted on there for around the square. So, I mean, I guess I found that just a little stark that you're a member of a alcoholics type group and also, voting for more drinking. So I don't know, pushing for it or whatever. It all seems weird to me. It seemed a little contradictory, but that's it. But and then, well, I just called it out like I normally would about how the city was putting a plant on it, and so when I told you it proved itself real fast, is Mike Gentry, Abby Gentry, a former Lebanon City Council member, and that guy's wife all came out to start throwing shade at me and running a defense. So you're over the target real good when it's coming in hot like that. So they all proved me exactly right that they were getting one of their plants onto a county position, and I called it straight out, and they all came out and confirmed it with the quickness. But and everybody's starting to see the way that Lebanon operates. You look at this Pike Township group and these other groups that are after saving the Eagle Creek Reservoir, and they have been posting about the shady things that Lebanon does, how they just putting stuff on their agenda right that day before they go take it into a vote. And, that's how they got the Meta even passed. Why, it could have been a driveway upgrade. Nobody would have been able to tell the difference between how they advertised the Meta vote. So they never said data center. They never said, Meta. They never said any of this stuff. They just kind of hid it under some low-hanging stuff and slipped it through there and got the vote in. But, this is the way they operate. They're constantly putting people around into these different boards. So if you look at all the boards across town, I mean, it's the city boards and then now onto the Boone EDC because they obviously firmly got their hands in that one too. But that's the way they do it. They sit there and they fill up these boards with all the loyalists. And you look, a lot of these boards, like on the city, Gentry gets to appoint the majority of them. So they get all these loyalists and all these different positions in the city, and then they can kind of push whatever they want, no matter how bad the community is against it. Because, you look at this thing about the Eagle Creek and sending all that wastewater to there. Well, the people of our area are good people. They don't want to send 25 million gallons a day of wastewater into the Eagle Creek, animal habitat and water supply. I mean, they just don't want to do it. This isn't something that good people are like, hey, I want to go do this. I mean, it's not even happening like that. This is something that's just kind of being forced by a very small percentage. And I mean, I did a poll, and like I said before, it had over 500 respondents, and it was 96% of people were against, sending that wastewater to the Eagle Creek Reservoir locally. And they actually, well, the Gentrys would love to say that my polls don't count, blah blah blah. They regularly report on polls and big news with 500-600 people. I mean, that's a sample enough that's going to give you a pretty good idea. And I'm going to, a little insider, somebody that's ran a lot of polls. Usually after 300 or 400, I mean, it becomes fractionable amount of change. Like it's kind of set in by that point. So just to line that, we've all pulled this. Everybody knows that this stuff isn't supported by the community. They're making us all look bad. The people of this area don't want that on them. They've been enjoying Eagle Creek. I know I've been wading and fishing it my whole life, and I know a lot of other people have too. And a lot of people are going to be pretty disappointed to see that just become a toilet for a bunch of uh, you know, big giant corporations because they only had to buy a small handful of politicians to get it done. But okay, as we enter the end of the show here, and I always try to leave on a positive note. Well, we have all the fights, we have all the bad that's coming down the pipe, this and that. I want to give you guys a little bit of what I'm going to call the silver lining on this right now. So out here in the county right now, this project with the water has been slowed up some for whatever reason. It has been shut down for 2 or 3 weeks. They've kind of halted the laying the pipe. And I'm not sure if somebody's, maybe I heard they might possibly be having a permitting problem through the county. But however, it's being slowed up and we have all this pressure coming from Indy. And I'm not sure that there might not be some amount of people blinking on taking it all the way and doing this thing because I think as more information gets out about this, I think more and more people. So you got to think if you're an Eli Lilly or something and you moved into Lebanon, do you want it to cost you your reputation of sending wastewater into Eagle Creek Reservoir? I mean, they've had their own history and they're constantly having to spit shine that image because they've had problems in the past. They've have a history of polluting, a history of feeding old people pills they didn't need. They have all kinds of stuff in there. So, they have to, be constantly working on this image thing and to have an unforced error like ruining one of the most visited parks, city parks in the US by dumping your wastewater in there. That's not the sort of thing that most people want to have on their legacy. So I don't know, guys. When we're coming after it, this stuff and this increased pressure and the steadily applied pressure, that makes a huge difference. You look at Meta. Meta never talked about doing a closed loop system until they announced, and we had all this backlash going on. You're going to start putting these pressure on these companies to make them want to change course. And the same way with these generators, we need to stay on about the pressure on them generators because if nothing else, while they may still do it, at least it might leverage them to put more things in place to quiet them down, more berming, more barriers, something to that effect that might help keep the surrounding residents from being damaged so much. But, this fight's not over. And this thing with the Eagle Creek Reservoir, it's not set in stone. It's not there yet. And they've finally encountered. They are having their day playing out here in the park where they have some insider politicians and politicos helping greasing the skids. But as they're going to get over there in the Indy, the backlash from some of these Indy politicians and some of these people over there, and then this lasting legacy of turning everybody's drinking water into basically a toilet, that stuff's going to carry. And, while the politicians keep coming out here and keep saying that I ought to get over it and that I ought to stop, that, I've gone too far, people used to listen to me, but nobody pays attention to any of this information I'm sharing no more. The reality is that's all a bunch of horse shit. We have grown every single month by the metrics as we continue to build a network of people sharing information and putting this stuff out here. I mean, the shop alone is up to 1.3 million views on the 90 days. And that means everything is getting out there. We now have the Barbara Besselo, who just filed the lawsuit with the IEDC, because I've never seen another person who has put as much effort into chasing down these connections. And if she's hopped in her vehicle, traveled to the places that said they had IEDC contracts, just see dirt floors and empty warehouses. These aren't places that have been doing work. This has all been shell games, as they've been fleecing everybody of a ton of money while they've all been enriching themselves by selling us out. But this stuff is going to get interesting. This show is not over. And I, for one, with this lawsuit, and this is going to be what I leave everybody with, because I, for one, cannot wait to start seeing some of these things come to light under discovery, because I've read a lot of what she's put and the connections that she's made and how they've created shell companies to pretty much grift all this money. And all of these players are in it. Everybody that you see working these deals with the Leap inside this government, all the different companies that are attached to it, they're all players. So with that, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. I'll see you next week.